Hey guys, welcome back to Total Tactics FPL. It's Fran here and I'm back with a new video, which is going to be the Game Week 6 review. It was overall a decent game week for me. I think definitely this was a week where I expected to have a red arrow, but I did come off well because of Trossard, who actually essentially saved this game week entirely for me. And I'm at the stage where I'm probably thinking about how I'd like to move my team. So this video will actually be scheduled where I review the points and then my team and my assets so far and how I feel about them. And then I'll talk about transfer plans before I then head off into discussing price rises and price falls. So that's going to be how the video is going to be scheduled out. As far as this week, I did get 48 points. It's not actually updated correctly on FPL because I did get the bonus points from Trossard. So that's the position that my team is in. And my final rank was around 230k. So a very, very slim green arrow. The safety score was around 46 as far as I checked from live FPL, and I'm pretty happy to have gotten a green arrow, especially since I did make, I guess, a transfer that hurt a little bit when I went from Ramsdale to Sanchez as opposed to the Pope option that I had suggested in my Game Week 6 team selection. But either way, I did force the transfer, and I do still feel like it is an interesting opportunity for Brighton to get a clean sheet versus Bournemouth next week. So hopefully that transfer doesn't actually work out as poorly as expected, and I'm happy that United also got a good result versus Arsenal, because that exactly was what I was expecting when moving off of Ramsdale this week. Sanchez, as I said, is an interesting asset because I am planning to Game Week 9 wildcard. He still has the Bournemouth and Crystal Palace games on the way, and I'm not really worried about him or Dunk for the time being. I still feel like they played quite well. We do know Leicester is a team where individually, I'd say on paper, that they do perform a lot better than the results have shown so far. Leicester are very, very close to a relegation spot. Their results will probably improve as we progress throughout the season, but they're definitely a team who are playing at that level, and especially from a defensive point of view, which is the most concerning thing. I think what's interesting about Leicester too when you're targeting them is Game Week 8, if you are planning to wildcard Game Week 9, there are opportunities to move into a Kane or into a Son, specifically on that fixture to target Leicester, and it wouldn't be a bad shout. As far as the rest of my team, with players like Trent, Cancelo, and James, I can't really see myself moving off of any of them, except for James on Game Week 8. Game Week 8 is going to be a tough game for Trent as well. I do expect the Chelsea team to not score versus Liverpool. I just feel like on balance, both these teams have actually been underperforming against our expectations, but Chelsea a little bit more so, because Chelsea have been a team that have underperformed specifically on the underlying numbers. I feel like they have individual players who have arguably even salvaged games, and they were in a sense also bailed out by VAR versus West Ham this weekend. But I do still like James independently as an asset. And if we talk about a Game Week 9 wildcard, someone like James has a wonderful run. So I can't see him being taken out of my team. The question is, when you wildcard in Game Week 9, would you want to actually go double Chelsea or even triple Chelsea? Some people already have Cucurella in their teams, but I think that he has been performing against their expectations, and with such a great Chilwell performance recently, you might have been questioning whether Chilwell could actually get starts over Cucurella and what would actually happen to their minutes, respectively. With Nico Williams, he served me well for this week. In such a low ceiling game week, having 4 points was actually something that I preferred, especially when the comparison was Dunk lower down with just 1 point. So in a sense, Nico Williams performed to my expectations because he outperformed Dunk, and that was exactly what he needed to do. The rest of my team was very dismaying. If we look at the midfield, I think Martinelli could have arguably gotten a goal. I don't really know what your opinions are on the foul on Odegaard. It did seem a little bit soft, but I can understand someone who would argue it as a foul. Definitely VAR is something that should be discussed, but independently, when we're talking about FPL, we'll just have to move on. With Luis Diaz and Salah, still a little bit uninteresting from both assets. Both hit the post because of some great Pickford saves. Diaz is someone who I feel like is potentially the more pressing transfer, because at Salah's price point, I'm not super interested right now in going to Son, who faces City. Neither am I interested in going to De Bruyne, who has the mirror matchup. When I'm talking about Sterling, I just feel like he doesn't perform towards, I think, the level that's needed when we're heading into a Liverpool game in Game Week 8, and that's going to be something that's going to color my decision making as to not go for Sterling from Salah. And that pretty much leaves Luis Diaz as the transfer for me, because Jota's kind of back into the team now. He's been back into training. If Luis Diaz starts this next Champions League game, then Jota could arguably also start on the left wing in the subsequent Premier League match versus Wolves, and then the next game's Chelsea. So this is a great window to move into some other midfield players, and we'll discuss that later when we talk about transfer plans. For Trossard, he stays because the 2 next fixtures for Brighton, as I said, are still great on paper, and especially with Crystal Palace and their attacking output worsening compared to the previous season, I still like Trossard and even the opportunity to get clean sheets versus Crystal Palace for Brighton. I'm just expecting, hopefully, another masterclass of a performance against Crystal Palace in Sanchez as opposed to Pope. As far as Haaland and Jesus, I still feel like they're both nailed in my teams. The top game for Jesus has come and gone, at least when we consider the ramp up to the Game Week 9 wildcard, so he stays. Arguably, I did miss the Mitrovic and Tony boat in terms of getting Mitrovic early from game week 1 and acknowledging that he's a great asset. And then with Tony after that Leeds game, I do think Southampton's actually going to give quite a good fight for Brentford, and I can't see myself moving into Tony. Neither can I really see myself moving out of Jesus until at least game week 8, but I don't think that's going to be the option as well because Brentford's still a good fixture on paper, and so it's going to be the question of whether Jesus stays on the wildcard for me. And Haaland, there's really nothing to talk about. He's just the best FPL asset we've seen in a while, and arguably already better than Salah. And that's the state of FPL. And I think it's worth talking later this week what our ideal Game Week 9 wildcard would be if I have time to do that video, because I do really feel like we're going to see some templates which is going to incorporate something like Haaland, Kane, and Mitrovic in the future, as opposed to incorporating Salah as your second premium. So that's going to be the Game Week review in terms of points. Let's have a look at my transfer plans. So as discussed with my transfer plans, especially since I actually wasted my second free transfer last week, got Sanchez into my team. I do like how my team looks on paper. I'm going to be playing Sanchez, Dunk, James, Trent, and Cancelo. So another back four. We're going to play 4-4-2 again. And I mentioned how Luis Diaz is going to be my likely transfer out. I feel like Arsenal's going to play a very rotated side in Europa League, but I don't think the same can be said for Luis Diaz. I feel like he could actually play in the Champions League and potentially get rest. So my transfer plans for Luis Diaz are either to go for a complete downgrade on price, which is to go from Luis Diaz to Rashford and free up 2.0 in the bank, or I could simply just move into someone like Saka, who feels like a little bit more of a lateral move and a better use of my funds. The question is whether that actually is the case, right? Because I've gone into triple Arsenal already in the past, I did dip out of Ramsdale so I can actually activate, I guess, the opportunity to move into Saka. So that is the transfer that looks quite fun because of the Everton fixture. But with United playing so well, I would just like to have an idea or at least an option open to go into Rashford. I'll still have to think about how I actually spend the 2.0 in the bank, because my likely transfer for game week 8 is actually going to be something like James to Trippier, because James is playing Liverpool and Trippier has a nice game on paper versus Bournemouth, and Trippier's been ticking along incredibly nicely. So those are the kind of plans that I have in the future, really, to have my team look like this. But with Rashford playing so well and with Rashford having a great game versus Leeds, that's kind of what's muddling my mind, I suppose. I'll have a lot of money in the bank, but is arguably going for Rashford over Saka the better option? Because I still don't see myself going out of Salah, especially for a hit. And because I only have one free transfer, as I said, Luis Diaz is the best option. The question is Rashford versus Crystal Palace and Leeds better than Saka versus Everton and Brentford? And I really feel like we are approaching the stage where, because Rashford is consistently playing 90 minutes at centre forward, that he's just as good as an option. And kind of what we talked about early in the preseason was that Rashford, if he has a great year and gets to play 90 minutes, which he has, if you look at Rashford's recent minutes so far, I believe it's something like 90, 85, 90. So yeah, exactly. So and that pretty much mirrors up to Rashford being one of the best assets in the game at this point for his pricing, very similar to Martinelli. So the way I see my transfer going is I'll probably watch out for the Europa games, see if anyone gets injured, see if anyone plays more minutes than I would have expected, and then I'll probably make a move towards Rashford or Saka, and then move into Trippier in the subsequent week in game week 8 and replace James and pick up James back on the wild card later on. And I think that's going to be my transfer plan so far. Let's actually move into talking about price rises and price falls. I feel like just quickly looking at the first page, there's actually no interesting movement so far. I do expect Rashford to eventually get a price rise because a lot of people will probably be FOMOing straight into Rashford. And it's not exactly the wrong decision at all, because with Leeds on game week 8 and Crystal Palace not exactly performing the best when it comes to the defensive numbers, despite keeping a clean sheet versus Newcastle, where arguably, I think if anyone was watching the game, Isaac could have had great opportunities. I do think Rashford is a very, very interesting transfer, and him playing centre forward does seem still a little bit more exciting than someone like Saka, who I mentioned on my transfer plan. So I do think Rashford will rise. None of the actual movements here are super interesting. Haaland going up, I mean, most of the game is going to have him now. And with McAllister, I feel like you still have a great pick amongst Gross and even someone like a Trossard. So Trossard and McAllister were the two assets that did the best versus Leicester, but I still think that Gross actually passed the eye test very well, performed extremely well, had some great shots, still takes all the corners and set pieces that are quite deep, so that's great opportunities to get bonus points too on a little bit of a lower scoring game, which potentially could happen versus Bournemouth. And yeah, I feel like there's no actually Brighton asset that I would go against, because McAllister, yes, okay, fine, he's on set pieces and he plays very deep at times, but the free kicks, the direct free kicks look great. I really wouldn't blame Ward too much. And then when I'm talking about penalties, Yeah, you're probably overshooting your expectations, expecting McAllister to have 4 penalties in 8 games, which is what it's going to take for McAllister to have his next penalty. But I can't really fault his pricing at 5.5 if you really want to chance it. So for me, I'd still say Trossard and Gross are the more interesting options, and then McAllister's the third one. But nothing's really wrong there because I think Brighton are arguably a little underpriced this year. The rest of the assets aren't super interesting. I think when we're talking about United defenders, I still think Dalot is by far the best one on paper. He is going to be the one who, when United actually keep a clean sheet, will get great amounts of bonus points. And then when we talk about the rest of the assets here, nothing too interesting because I still feel like when we're looking at Sancho, who's close to a price rise, and Rashford's just that much better. Tony's seeing price increases. I feel like he'll bounce immediately back up as people react to that hat trick, and I don't think that's necessarily the wrong option. If you wanted to go Tony, I suppose for 2 weeks, even though one of the games is going to be Arsenal, I guess you could, but I do feel like the window exactly was hit when that Leicester game, or so when that Leeds game happened, and there's no reason to move into him now. The rest of the assets here don't interest me too much, barring Zaha and Trossard. Those are the two assets that I would say going forward are interesting. If you're someone who actually wildcarded earlier on this season, I feel like Zaha is the one that you'd like to keep because their games are also very, very good. So when we talk long term, Zaha's the better asset to go for. If you're on a game week 9 wildcard trajectory, then potentially not. And if we move into the price falls, Odegaard and Rodrigo makes sense. Jesus is a little bit of a shocking one, but I feel like that's a lot of people reacting and panicking with Jesus getting some odd blanks, but I still feel like he looks incredible in the Arsenal games, and the Everton game is exactly the type of one where he might even be a better captaincy option than Haaland. And not to mention that I still think, as I said, the Tony window has kind of come and gone, and Mitrovic for me still is activated in game week 8, even though Mitrovic has been, I mean, he absolutely has to be nailed on the game week 9 wildcard, is the position that Mitrovic now possesses in FPL. Some of the other price falls here aren't super interesting, so let's go on to page 3, and once again, not that interesting going forward. So exactly, I think that's the situation here with the price falls. Nothing too alarming, I would say. I think in the future, you're probably going to want to actually keep some of the Arsenal assets, but potentially only 2 of them or 1 of them going into the Game Week 9 wildcard. And I wouldn't FOMO into anyone barring Rashford this week when we're talking about transfers in and transfers out. And that's going to be my take for this week. So thank you guys so much for watching the Game Week 6 review, and I'll see you guys shortly.